All right, everyone, this is Marco Palmero, founder of Ulysses in Dubai. And in this video, I want to discuss with you some of the things that I found to work very well for me when discussing and negotiating business transactions or business agreements with other people. And I want to talk about that because many times in UAE, you happen to interact with other cultures because we have a very diverse community in the UAE. And as a consequence, you need to adapt to the other side and also understand where they're coming from. And that really enabled me to test and understand what are the best possible ways to interact with somebody that might have a different background compared to myself. And so before we actually dive into the things that I've learned and that have worked for me in recent years, I want to give you a little background on what the UAE are all about. 90% of people here in the country are expatriates, and they're coming from many different countries around the world. As a consequence, they bring to the negotiation table, if we're talking about business, different ways of thinking and different mindsets. And that is because in most cases, we're talking about first generation expatriates. So you happen to deal with people that come from different social and economic backgrounds. And as a consequence, you also want to make sure you can understand their position and you can get your point across in the best possible way. One of the things that I've realized over time is that in many cases, for a lot of us, English is a secondary language, is not the primary language. And so the communication is already more complex than it should be, because sometimes we struggle in understanding each other when we talk the same language. I mean, I'm Italian, for example, and sometimes it's difficult to understand what another Italian is talking about, let alone when you are, handling and making business, doing business, using a second language. That happens a lot in UAE, and of course, different people have different English level, and you need to make sure you can understand their point and you can also get your point across in the best possible way while using a language that is not, the primary language of both sides. Now, what are the things that I've realized over time? Well, of course, it's kind of obvious, but sometimes people don't do that. Listening is an important part of any business interaction, especially when you're doing a big transaction, big deals. You're potentially talking about buying companies or building long-term partnerships. Listening what the other side is talking about is more important than what you think and what you want to get across as your point, because the insights that you will collect will also enable you to better address other people's concerns and worries and potentially get more deals done. Now, the way I found to, what I realized to be very effective when discussing with other people is repeating part of what they just said, sort of like mirroring, but I wouldn't call it mirroring because it's not really a mirroring exercise that you're going through. You're just repeating and reiterating what they just said to make sure you understood it correctly. And that goes back to the point that I just mentioned, that English is not the primary language of a lot of people. And sometimes when you just listen and answer questions without repeating stuff, you sort of like might deviate from what the other person was meaning when getting a point across. And so you might interpret certain things in a different way. And that is something that I always want to avoid, because lack of clarity is what kills most of the transactions that you're going to do. At least that's what I found from my personal experience. And so I want clarity to always be in control of the conversation. So again, it's not really a mirroring exercise that I'm going through. Is more like trying to make sure the other side said what I listened to. And I repeat what they said multiple times, saying something like, just making sure I understood what you said correctly. Your goals are to da 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 da. And that really enables you to get a lot more insight in what the other person is talking about, and also what is in the other person's head. Because what I found is that as you do this, the other person will not only appreciate the fact that you repeated that, because that tells them that you listened to what he was saying, but he will also step into the conversation a lot more and potentially explain the concept even better. And so that has two positive effects from my perspective. There are, one, you show the other person a genuine interest because you've listened to what he had to say. And second, he's also going to step into the discussion a lot more and provide you with more details to understand the concept better. Now, those things I found to be very, very effective in interacting with people from many different cultures, because again, it enables me to collect a lot more data and also better address what the other person's concerns are. Of course, that might not apply for all the discussions, but what I've seen is that when you're having an exchange, that really takes the conversation to a whole new level, and to some respect also enables you to spot potential, I would say, potential lies, if we want to call them this way, or things that are not sounding right. Because if somebody says something that is not right one time, it is very, very difficult for him to repeat it exactly as it is. So if he's telling you something that is not true, repeating it exactly the same is going to be a lot harder unless he practiced a lot and he's a professional liar. And as a consequence, repeating these things and going through these loops over and over again can really enable you to spot things that are not necessarily accurate, and also have better communications with the ones that are actually genuine about doing business with you. So my point is that I always want to try to bring clarity to the conversation, and asking for clarification and sometimes even looking dumber might be the best way to go about it. At least that's just what I found. And so I take a very humble approach towards discussions, and I'm not afraid to ask questions or ask people to repeat stuff, because I know that that will enable me to gain clarity. And in many cases, the other side will appreciate that. That's at least what I found personally. Now, that's not going to be the case in all situations, of course, but I believe that, at least for me, acquisition standpoint, big ticket transaction standpoint, it is always important to understand facts, and I'm never afraid to ask things multiple times. And if I don't get answers to specific questions after I ask multiple times, I generally identify that as a red flag, because I see that as something the other side isn't willing to share. And so if they're not prepared to share something, chances are there's something hiding, and there might be something shady happening behind the curtains. So I think that it's a small trick, really, but it really helped me a lot in dealing with people from different cultures, people that don't have English as their primary language, and ultimately gain more insights when I'm trying to get a transaction done, when I'm trying to ascertain whether or not a business is worth buying, whether or not the information that we saw on paper are actually accurate. And I'm sure this is something many people are familiar with, but I think it has been a big breakthrough for me, because back in the day, I wasn't really used to repeating stuff, because maybe I was doing business in my native language, or I was doing business in the United States where English was the primary language of most people. As I came to UAE, I had to adapt and find a way to understand the other side better. So I think one of the things that I learned from the UAE is how to listen in a better way, which was kind of hard to me, for me, I have to say, because I'm not a good listener. But anyways, I think that this concept of repeating what the other person says is really important when you want to have productive discussions and understand what the other side is all about. And so I use it both in person and on Zoom calls, especially in Zoom calls, I have to say, because over there you don't have the interpersonal connection that also enables you to understand the other side a lot better. And so it is important to ask a lot more, because you only have the communication part and you're seeing something on a camera. And so it is mandatory for me to get a lot more insights in what the other person is talking about. And that, again, is something that has worked for me. I thought I would share it because I think it's a valuable insight that some people might not be aware of, especially if they've been dealing in their native language for their entire life. I mean, sometimes if English is your primary language, you take that for granted, and so you listen a lot less because everything comes quick to you. But as you happen to deal with other cultures in a country like the UAE, you kind of like need to adapt and find best ways to deal with this language barrier. And that's, again, the solution that I found. I'm constantly learning, and that's pretty much it.